Start with the helmet. You're going to want the Harmony of Ebawaka. You want to get greater affix on damage reduction if you can, and masterwork that as many times as you can. Now, with the way this helmet works is according to your secondary Spirit Hall choice, your skills are additionally Jaguar, Eagle, Gorilla, or Centipede skills. The way it works is whatever your first choice is, all your skills that are not Jaguar skills are also Jaguar skills. So for example, Touch of Death is a Centipede skill, but now it's also a Jaguar skill. Now, what this helmet does is it makes it so that your second choice gets the same effect as this. So now, Touch of Death is not only a Centipede and Jaguar skill, but it's also a Gorilla skill. And now, any benefits that Jaguar or Gorilla skills get, you also get with Touch of Death, so that's really nice. And additionally, you get 30 times increased damage per spirit type, and since Touch of Death now has 3 spirit types, you get 90 times increased damage. The runes, you're going to want Pock and Q. Pock, spending 5% of your maximum resource. You invoke Druid's Earthen Bulwark, granting yourself a barrier. For the chests, you're going to want Armor, Dex, Max Life, Maximum Resolve Stacks, Barrier Gen, and the aspect you're going to want is the aspect of Interdiction. You want to try to temper Maximum Resolve Stacks as many times as you can. The reason why is, for starters, the way this aspect works is you get 15% block chance per resolve stack that you have, right? And so if we scroll over here to block chance, we are sitting at 61%. And so the way block chance works is, say I have 100% block chance, right? So every time that you block an attack, you get a certain amount of damage reduction, right? So it's just like a damage reduction perk. So if I have 100% block chance and 20% block damage reduction, I get 20% damage reduction all the time. But if I have 50% block chance and 20% damage reduction, I essentially only have 10% damage reduction because I'm only blocking 50% of the attacks. So this allows us to get to that 100%. And the reason why we want to get to the 100% is because if we go to this perk, Perseverance, we get 1.5 additional damage reduction per resolve stack. Now, the way resolve works is you get increased damage reduction by 20. So just having resolve in general gets you 20% damage reduction. And then when you take direct damage, you consume a stack and you can hold up to 8. But because we stack so many resolve stacks, we actually have 38. And so we're actually getting about 56% additional damage reduction. The Colossal Glyph, what it does is you deal 2 times increased damage for each stack of resolve that you have. And again, we have 38 stacks. So we get 76 times increased damage. The gloves, you're going to want attack speed, ranks to core skills, armor, crit damage. You can also get basic skill damage there. And then you want any kind of lucky hit effect. And the aspect we're using is redirected force. Now, the reason why I think it's important to get one of those lucky hit effects is because you have an ability called Scourge. And what Scourge does is it, you get increased damage and you get healing. But the con of it is that it fears enemies. And when enemies are feared, they run away from you, which is really annoying. So what I like is if you have something, for example, freeze, when you hit Scourge, instead of them immediately running away, they just get frozen in place, and then you don't have to worry about them running away. That's nice. Now, the way the aspect of redirecting force is, because this is one of the bugs with the Spiritborn, is you get 70 times increased damage, critical strike damage, equal to your block chance, and blocking doubles this bonus, right? So we have 100% block chance, but we get this 140 times all the time, right? It's 100% uptime. But where the bug comes in is with this aspect right here. So remember, every resolve stack we have adds additional block chance. But the way block chance is supposed to work is you're only supposed to have 100% block chance. It's not supposed to go over that. And so because of that, this is part of the bug, and this is why the build will probably do like more damage than it should. It's the reason why it's doing more damage than it should. For the legs, you're going to want armor, max life, dex. You're going to want maximum resolve stacks, barrier gen, and you're going to want the duelist aspect. Your maximum ferocity is increased by 5. So the way ferocity works is you get 5% increased attack speed per stack of ferocity. You can have a maximum of 4 stacks before this aspect, right? So that's 20% attack speed, and every 4 seconds you lose a stack. So with this aspect, instead of getting only 4 stacks, we can now get 9 stacks. So instead of 20% attack speed, we can get 45% attack speed. And I'll talk about how we refill that as we later on in the video. And for the gems, you're going to want amethyst gems. Gives us barrier generation. Now, this is also, unfortunately, a bug, right? So if we go to the Paragon board, there is a legendary node called Viscous Shield. And what it's supposed to do is it's supposed to give you increased damage based on your maximum life and barrier. Based on your barrier, right? So The reason why we went with barrier generation is because Earth and Bulwark only gives us 45% barrier. So we need more than 100% barrier bonus to get 100% barrier. So unfortunately, because of that, we benefit from this bug of Viscous Shield. But again, we didn't do this because of the bug. We did this because that was the logical choice to do, right? Even if that gets fixed, again, you would still keep these gems in anyway. At least I would, right? You can also use Rakanoth's Wake. But the reason why I don't like Rakanoth's Wake is because the perk is kind of useless. Like, it doesn't really do anything. So I'd much rather have the chance to cast another one of these skills for free than to have that little weird fire perk that it does. These boots, you want to get a greater affix on resistance to all elements, and you want to hit it at least once. This way you can cap all of your resistances. And then once those are capped, you no longer need to put whatever gems that you'll need to get your resistances up. So you'll eventually get to a point where you can put skulls in here. And we'll talk about why that's important coming up. Using the Rod of Kepaleke, you want to get a greater affix on chance for core skills to cast twice. You want to try to hit that as many times as you can. What this staff does is your core skills are now also basic skills, and they're free to cast, but they do reduce damage based on their vigor costs. Now, when cast at maximum vigor, your core skills consume all the vigor to return to full damage. When you cast them at maximum vigor, they become guaranteed strikes, and they do 3% increased damage per point of vigor that you spent. So this build is focused around getting as much vigor as you can, and also getting as much resource generation as you can, because you need a certain amount of resource generation to be able to constantly spam this and get the benefits, and this build solves that, so not an issue there. And then the two runes that you're going to want are Zol and Cry. What Zol does is every time you invoke a skill from another class, you get Offering, and then it allows you to invoke the Spiritborn's Vortex. It's going to help also negate Scourge. We can pull enemies back in when they're running away from being feared. And then we're casting a skill from another class by casting this Earth and Bulwark. So these go hand in hand. For the Amulet, you're going to want ranks to Potent, Dexterity, Total Armor. I like movement speed here, maximum resolve stacks. And then the aspect you're going to want is Insatiable Aspect. What this does is kills extend the duration of your active touch or death swarms. Every time a swarm is replaced, it bursts for 450% of your damage done. This is a huge damage increase for this ability. So this is a very important thing here. Now, one thing I want to note, the way this season works now, it is very, very hard to get Ancestrals, right? And so trying to roll Potent is probably not realistic. So what I would recommend is, if you're able to get an Amulet with Dexterity and Armor, I would re-roll whatever perk you get until you at least get maximum resource, because you'll benefit from maximum resource because of the Rod of Kepaleke. But if you can get Potent, get Potent. But if not, then I would go for maximum resource. The next ring we're using is the Ring of the Midnight Sun. You want to get a greater affix on cooldown reduction. Hit that as many times as you can. Whenever you critically strike, you regain 50% of your vigor. And you also gain counterattack's passive effect. So this basically just helps with our resource gen. Currently, our resource gen is sitting at 59%. Plus this 50, we'll have 100%. We'll have plenty to constantly refill our vigor every time we use the Rod of Kepaleke. So this is helping get that bonus. Now, what's really interesting about this gained counterattack's passive effect, because you see here it's not on the bar. Interestingly enough, so the passive effect here is you get 10% dodge, and you automatically retaliate against close enemies for 80% of the damage when you dodge an attack. That part doesn't really matter. What's interesting is if you spec into reinforced counterattack, you get an increase of critical strike damage by 6% for each close enemy, and you actually still get this even though it's not on your bar. So when it says you get the passive effect, you also get this passive effect, which is really nice. So you actually don't need it on your bar. Next ring, you're going to want attack speed, max life, lucky hit chance to make enemies vulnerable. You want crit, resource gen, and the aspect you're going to use is the aspect of unyielding hits. Try to get a greater affix on max life. Hit that as many times as you can, but you can also do attack speed. Doesn't really matter which one you do here. The way unyielding hits work is the reason why we want to be able to put skulls in our jewelry, and also the reason why we get total armor on our amulet, because the armor cap is only 1,000, but as you can see here, we're at 5,000, right? And so you want to get at least 4,500 armor, because Your weapon damage is increased by 30% of your armor for 3 seconds whenever you cast a gorilla skill, and the maximum benefit you can get is 1500. So if you get 4500, you'll get that 1500. Now I went over because when you go over, now you don't have to worry about not getting perfect rolls on these armors and having some of this be a little off, or maybe your resistances aren't quite right, and so you have to put a diamond gem here, not a skull gem, so you're losing out on some armor. So this gives you a little bit of breathing room to be able to get as much benefit from this as you can. That's why I did that there. Quickly on the spear hall choices, we're going Jaguar. So every 15 time we deal direct damage to an enemy with a Jaguar skill, do an additional strike dealing 15% of the damage dealt to them. And then for the second choice, we're going Gorilla. So we get an additional 2 resolve, and we talked about the resolve stacking. And every time we have 5 resolve, we're unstoppable. So on this build, you'll be unstoppable all the time. So for your basic skill, it doesn't matter. Just pick whatever you want. I'm going to go 3 points into Vigorous. It's into Balance Exertion. 1 point into Soar. 1 point into Hand Soar. 1 point into Focal Point. 3 points into Apex. 1 point into Mirage. 3 points into Unrestrained Power. You're going to want Ravager, Enhanced Ravager, Measured Ravager. Now what Ravager does is, because this is a very important ability, right? Whenever you press this ability, your attacks do additional attacks for 6 seconds. And also you are able to dash to targets, and you get vigor generation. You want to have this up as much as possible. Now with that being said, every time you get a kill with this ability, it extends the duration. So what you need to pay attention to is be a green bar above the skill, and the green bar lets you know how long the duration is. If there's a green bar and this comes back on cooldown, do not press it. And the reason why you don't want to press it is because then you're going to reset. And the reason why you don't want to do that is because whatever additional time that you've accumulated on this skill, like to make it last longer, that gets reset. So there's no need to press it again. You don't want to press it again. Only press this if you don't see the green bar and the skill is available, because you want to have this up 100% of the time. So just keep that in mind. Then you're going to go Endurance, Perseverance, Armor Hide, Enhanced Armor Hide. You want to make sure you also press this whenever it's up. And the reason why is because remember, every time you get hit, you lose a resolve stack, and this refills all of your resolve back to maximum. So you want to press this as often as possible as well. Then you're going to go Counterattack, Enhanced Counterattack, Reinforced Counterattack. You're going to go Scourge, Enhanced Scourge, Adaptable Scourge. You're going to go Patient Guard, Auspicious, Resilient, Dominant, Vehemence, Potent, Furnace, and then Touch of Death. So what Touch of Death does, every time you hit an enemy, you deal 5% damage, and then you do 630% poison damage over 9 seconds. When the infection expires, or the host dies, a swarm hatches and seeks enemies for 9 seconds, dealing 21% per hit. And you can only have 3 active swarms. Each of these swarms heals you. And now, because of this perk right here, this is now also a core skill. So this is no longer a cooldown. Then you can go 1 point in Resolution, 3 points in the Spiritual Attunement, 3 points in the Supremacy. You're going to go Hunter, Harmonious Hunter, and Exalted Hunter. Now, the reason why we go with the Hunter is because remember, we have these maximum ferocity stacks, and we lose a ferocity stack every 4 seconds. What the Hunter does is every time we press the Hunter, we refill all of our ferocity stacks. So this is the way we keep our attack speed at maximum as much as possible. And the Hunter has a perk where every time you kill an enemy while the Hunter is active, you get a 40% chance to instantly reset its cooldown. Now this effect is halved every time you reset it, so there will be a point in time where you will have to wait the entire cooldown, but at least you can get this off 2 or 3 times. So I recommend pressing this whenever there's like a big pack of enemies. And now for the key passive. So we're going with Noxious Resonance. Your critical strikes cause poisoning on an enemy to burst, dealing 100% of the total poison instantly to them for 20% of its surrounding enemies before removing poison. Your damage is increased by 30% of your critical strike damage bonus. And this bonus is actually uncapped. That's the reason why we try to stack as much crit damage as possible. Now, I want to say something real quick about this skill. I think you should use this skill 90% of the time, but the 10% of the time, let's say doing tormented boss rotations, or you're really trying to push pits, not doing pits to upgrade your glyphs, but pushing pits like trying to see as far as you can go, I recommend you use this. Prodigy's tempo. The reason being is Prodigy's tempo reduces your active cooldowns, and eventually you'll get to a point where enemies' health is it's a lot, and it's going to take you a while to kill them. And so things like Ravager, you won't be able to have 100% uptime. So this will give you 100% uptime of all these abilities, which is more important than this skill. And I actually prefer Noxious Resonance over Prodigy's tempo, because the thing about Prodigy's tempo is when you attack, there's like a delay from them exploding from all your poison and everything. But with Noxious Resonance, it's like an instant explosion. So you can just dash to enemies and they'll instantly explode. So this feels a lot better. Against lower health enemies, this feels a little clunky. But against higher health enemies, this obviously will feel better. So just a heads up there. And for the Paragon board, quickly go over that. We're going with Colossal Glyph. So again, we deal 2 times increased damage per resolve stack. We have 38 stacks. We got 76 times increased damage. We have the Menagerous Glyph. So every time we deal damage with a Gorilla, Jaguar, or Eagle skill or Centipede skill, we get 4 times increased damage. And remember, because of the helmet we have 3 spirits. So we get 12 times increased damage. Then you get the Sapping Node. Every time you cast one of your skills 3 times, you get 30 times increased damage, 15% bigger. And then we move over to Viscous Shield, and we talked about this. We have that 100% barrier, so we have the maximum damage bonus from this. And go the Bane Glyph. The poisoning effects have 15% chance to deal double damage over the amount of the duration, so this is good. Then we move up to Convergence, and we get Fitness. It's giving us more critical strike damage to scale our key passive. It also generates 3 vigor. I mean, that's not really that important, but it's decent. And then the Convergence legendary node, we deal bonus damage equal to 20% of our 2 highest bonuses combined up to 30%. So we have maximum-ness all the time. Then lastly, we're going with the Spirit Glyph. And every time we crit, we get up to 15 times increased damage. And then what the legendary node does is every time we block, and remember, we have a 100% block chance, we get 2% increased attack speed and 1% increased damage for 5 seconds, stacking up to 9 seconds. So we get an additional 18% attack speed, an additional 9 times increased damage every time we block, which is all the time. So this pretty much has 100% uptime. So this is really nice. And lastly, just quickly going over the Mercenaries. We just get a little bit of armor here, but you can also go here to slow enemies. But the most important perk is this one right here. So our next 4 core skills within 10 seconds deal 25 times increased damage and have no resource costs. So that's nice. And then Varanya right here. We just use her because she gives us 10% attack speed. And I have it mapped to the Hunter. So that way, whenever we press the Hunter, is usually when there'll be the most enemies. So that's when we probably want to get the attack speed anyway. So that's nice there. And that's all I got. Peace.